expected his entire world to shift because of one blind date. But that's exactly what happened the night a single dad named Mark walked into a small family restaurant, thinking he was meeting someone who might finally give him a chance at happiness. Instead, he found himself standing in front of a young woman in a wheelchair, her hands resting quietly in her lap, her eyes bright but distant. She couldn't hear him. She couldn't move much. And the first thing he thought was, this has to be a mistake. His friends had tricked him. And yet, what she eventually told him would leave him in tears. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment to support Kindness World, where we share real, heartwarming stories that remind us how powerful kindness can be. Mark was a father before he was anything else. He worked long overnight shifts at a warehouse, packed lunches every morning, folded tiny shirts every night, and somehow kept going even when life felt heavier than he could carry. His son, Jamie, was only 6, full of questions and energy, the kind of boy who needed both parents, but only had one. Mark had long closed the part of his heart that hoped for romance. He told himself he was too busy, too tired, too worn out. But his friends disagreed, and after months of insisting, they finally talked him into a blind date. He didn't dress fancy, just clean jeans and a button-up shirt. As he drove, he wondered if he could even be good company for anyone. When he stepped into the restaurant, he scanned the room for a woman waving at him, smiling at him, something normal. Instead, a server led him to a small table by the window. There she was. Lily. A soft blanket covered her legs. Her wheelchair was compact but clearly permanent. Her hands moved slightly, making small gestures Mark didn't understand. The server explained she was deaf and needed help reading the menu. For a moment, Mark froze. Not because she was disabled but because he suddenly felt like he wasn't prepared for this. He didn't know sign language. He didn't know how to communicate. And somewhere deep down, he felt embarrassed that his friends had set him up without telling him anything. He almost left. He almost said, "I'm sorry, this must be a mistake." But then Lily looked up at him, her eyes full of patience, and something else. Something like kindness. Mark sat down. At first, they communicated through a small tablet Lily kept on her lap. She typed slowly, one finger at a time. She told him she was born hearing but lost her abilities after a childhood illness. She explained she wasn't paralyzed by accident, it was a condition she'd had most of her life. She told him she lived with her sister and worked part-time designing digital artwork. Mark typed back, awkwardly at first, but she smiled at every clumsy sentence he sent. Slowly, the tension eased. Slowly, he stopped thinking about what she couldn't do and started noticing who she was. He learned she loved sunsets. She painted them often, pulling color from memory, from imagination. She loved animals, especially dogs, even though she couldn't take one on walks. She loved people watching and imagining stories for strangers passing by. And most of all, she loved laughing, something Mark didn't expect, because whenever she laughed, it was silent. Just a shaking of her shoulders, a sparkle in her eyes. But it was real. It was joyful. As dinner went on, Mark felt something inside him soften. Lily, without even speaking, made him feel seen. She didn't ask him why he was a single dad. She didn't ask what happened to Jamie's mother. She didn't ask about his past at all. Instead, she typed, "You look tired. Are you taking care of yourself?" And that was when Mark felt it, the warmth of someone who actually cared. Halfway through the dinner, his phone buzzed. The babysitter was calling. Jamie was crying for him. Mark apologized, grabbed his jacket, and prepared to leave early, afraid he'd ruined everything. But Lily typed something before he could go, "You're a good dad. Don't worry about leaving. Thank you for coming tonight." He didn't know why, but her words hit him harder than anything he'd heard in years. The next morning, Mark found a message on his phone. It was from Lily's sister. She thanked him for treating Lily with dignity. She explained that Lily had been on a few dates before, but people often left within minutes. Some didn't even sit down. Some couldn't hide the discomfort in their eyes. But Mark didn't walk away. And that alone meant the world to her. Days passed. Then a week. Mark found himself thinking about Lily's soft smile, her silent laughter, the way she typed with so much patience. He found himself wanting to see her again. So he sent a message asking if she wanted to meet for coffee. She replied with one word, absolutely. This time, he brought Jamie. He was nervous about that decision, maybe too soon, maybe too much, but Jamie was curious, and Lily seemed safe, kind, gentle. When she saw the little boy peeking out from behind Mark's leg, she smiled so brightly it lit up the whole cafe. She waved at him, then typed on her tablet, "Hi Jamie. I like your dinosaur shirt." Jamie giggled. "How'd she know I like dinosaurs?" he asked. Mark explained she read his shirt, and suddenly, Jamie had a million questions. Can she hear cartoons? Does she dream with sound? Can she feel when she laughs even though she can't talk like me? Mark began to worry he'd overwhelmed her, but Lily shook her head, laughing her silent laugh. She typed, "Kids ask the best questions. Thank you for bringing him." That afternoon changed everything. Mark realized how naturally she fit into his world. She didn't need anything from him. She didn't pity him. She didn't judge him for the messy parts of his life. She simply offered kindness, gentle, patient kindness. Over the next few months, they met often. Sometimes at the park, sometimes for lunch, sometimes just to sit and watch the world go by. Mark learned to understand some of her gestures. Lily learned to understand his silences. And Jamie adored her. One warm evening, as the sun melted into orange and gold over the horizon, Lily typed something on her tablet. Her hands trembled slightly, so it took longer than usual. When she turned the screen toward him, Mark felt his throat tighten. It said, "No one has ever treated me like I matter. But you did. You made me feel human. You made me feel worth knowing. Thank you for being kind." Mark couldn't look away from the words. He had done nothing extraordinary, at least not in his eyes. He had simply shown up. He had listened. He had stayed. But to her, that was everything. And in that moment, he realized something: kindness doesn't have to be grand to be life-changing. Sometimes it's just choosing to sit down instead of walking away. Tears filled his eyes. He reached for her hand, held it gently, and whispered even though she couldn't hear him, "You matter. More than you know." The world around them softened, and for the first time in years, Mark felt hopeful, truly hopeful. Not because he'd found romance, but because he'd been reminded of something much more powerful: kindness creates connections where fear once stood. Kindness heals wounds no one sees. Kindness changes lives, quietly, steadily, beautifully.